Welcome to another episode of data wrangling using KNIME. In this video, we'll look at dynamically controlling the file name of a output node such as an Excel writer from a KNIME workflow. And this specific example is to look at adding a dynamic date to the file name that gets exported from a workflow. If you ever built a workflow that runs on a daily, weekly, or even at random, you may have had the need to include the current date on the file in the file name. For example, if your export file name was analysis_results.xlsx and you wanted to include the current date on the file name, it might look something like analysis_results underscore 6th February 2024.xlsx. If you don't want to manually go and edit the file name every time you run the workflow, you can set up your workflow to automatically add the date to the file name. One way of having your workflow automatically append the current date to your file name is what we are going to look at now. This can be achieved using 4 nodes. The first one is called create date and time range. Using the create date and time range node, we are going to generate the current date or the date when the workflow was executed. The next node that we'll need is called the table row to variable node. We take the date which gets generated as any other table row and we convert that into a variable, so we can use that as a variable input to the Excel writer node. The next step in the process is to use a string manipulation node but we use the string manipulation variable version of the node and we use that to actually create the file name, which takes the automatically created date as an input to the final file name. The last step then is to use the string to path variable node and convert the string that we generate in the previous step into a path variable that can be directly fed as an input to the Excel writer node. Let's now go and configure each of these nodes and look at how we can make this dynamic file name manipulation happen. First, let's configure the create date and time range. The output type in this case is just date. All I want right now is date. So I'm going to remove and time from the column name. I just need one row of date, so I'll change the number of rows to 1. And the starting point, I will use the option use execution date and time. The end point also I will use execution date and time. Click OK. Now when I run this node, you will see that the output of this node is just today's date. Next, we will connect this to the table row to variable node, and we will run the node. There is no configuration as such for the table row to variable node in this case. The next step is to take the output from this node and connect it to the string manipulation variable node, and let's configure the file name in this case. I'm going to use the join command to create a file name. So this will be my path of where the file is going to get saved and the base name of the file. Next, I'm going to use the date variable here, followed by the file extension. So the arguments to my join command are the string which defines the path that I want the file to be saved in, the base name of the file. The second argument is the dynamic date coming from the previous node, followed by the extension that I want. I'm going to call this variable as file path. I'll click OK and I will run the node. So when I run the node, you will see that a new variable is now available in the workflow with the path that I specified and the file name along with the date. The next step is to connect this string and convert that into a path variable. And I'm going to run this node and you'll see that the file path location gets generated as a variable name. Now if I take the string to path variable node and connect that to the variable port of the Excel writer, I can now configure the Excel writer node to automatically choose the file path location that's being generated by the string to path variable. So you'll see that as soon as I selected that variable, the file name automatically changed to the one that I defined using the string manipulation variable node. And the second confirmation that you have is that the path is the message that is shown here, which says the path parameter is controlled by a variable. I'm going to click OK again. And now when I run this node, and when I go to the folder location, you will see that the file person_city_data_ followed by the date of when this workflow ran, followed by .xlsx, which is my expected file name at the location that I want it. So this is how you can add automatic date generation to your workflow and have the date automatically added to the file name that you want from the workflow. By doing this, you avoid the hassle of every time going and manually specifying a file name if all that you're doing is changing the date on it. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Data Wrangling using KNIME. Hope you find this useful and see you again in the next episode.